We are.
All right. This is the March 26th meeting of the City of Belvedere Finance Committee meeting. Helga, can you call roll?
Yes. Chair McCaskill,
Here.
David Walker,
Walker here.
Morning, David.
Morning.
John Wilton,
Here.
Patrick Fader,
Yeah.
Will Lyon,
Here.
Sally Wilkinson,
Present.
and Mayor Mark. And we have Robert Zadnik, our city manager, is joining us via Zoom today. And I'm Helga Cotter, the Director of Administrative Services.
And Helga, are there any other visitors online?
We have one other guest online.
Okay, so that begs the question, when do we do the open forum? At the beginning or the end? Or maybe it doesn't matter with only one subject matter, just it may be after the discussion we ask for open forum.
After.
All right, we only have one item on our agenda today, and that's the discussion and possible recommendations regarding the funding request for Martha's property.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yes,
I think your mic isn't on.
yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We're gonna get closer to this thing. Sorry. Okay. We're going to first hear from the representatives of Martha Property, and then Helga has some information to share with the Finance Committee before we begin our deliberations. So Erica or Jerry, or both of you, you're on.
Wasn't there. Looks likely. Okay, am I there? I'm there. So, good morning, Council, Chair Bob McCaskill, and all. I'm Jerry Reeson, and this is Erica Williams. She and I will both be presenting today. And you all have the printed handouts. We're gonna, I see this as an information meeting. As I have explained repeatedly, this is, at least it's not our intent to ask for any funding today. We're merely here to update you guys so that you can do whatever you wish as far as advising your council. So with that, I'll start and roll through a bunch of slides. The first one is just to remind you of how valuable this property is. You can pretty much see it from looking out the window here. The second slide is just to show you, remind you where it is and its connection with the property that we all funded and purchased in the 1990s, 1993 bond issue and 1997 bond issue, both successful, and then purchased Old St. Hilary's, the green parcel, and now we're talking about the one right next to it, the Martha parcel. The next slide is just again to remind you that your citizens very much are in favor generally of open space and extra in favor of specifically saving Martha for a host of reasons that we're all familiar with. But the Measure M in Belvedere passed with almost 75%, 2/3 was required, and so it's a very substantial outpouring of support. The photo, airplane photo, whatever, gives you a little idea of the outline of the property. The next slide and the following couple slides, Erica is going to address. And so I'll hand it over to Erica Williams. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for,
I'm going to share it so that those online can also see it.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much. Good morning, Chair McCaskill and committee members. My name is Erica Williams. I'm a senior project manager with the Trust for Public Land, and I manage our Bay Area Acquisitions Program. I'm also a resident of Tiburon. I'm chair of the Tiburon Planning Commission, and I was born and raised in Mill Valley. It's not too far away. So as Jerry explained, we're really here to give you an update on the status of our acquisition efforts. They are going well. And of course, we wanted to provide you with some funding updates and answer any questions that you may have as you consider, participating in this incredible opportunity. So just to give you some background, some context, and this will be relevant to what I'll be talking about in a few minutes. We did in June of 2022, Trust for Public Land entered into a 2-year option agreement with the Martha Company, the owners of the Martha property. The agreed upon purchase price was $42.1 million. At the same time that we did that, we also entered into a separate agreement, a purchase and sale agreement with Marin County Open Space District. So if we acquire the property, we have agreed to transfer it over to Marin County to own and manage. And Marin will put in, they will contribute funding, which I'll explain in a few minutes. Under that agreement, we do have to demonstrate to them at a certain point in time that we have obtained the full funding to move forward with acquisition. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. The county helped us, Tiburon Open Space and TPL, put together the Measure M ballot measure that was on the November 2022 ballot. As you all know, that passed with overwhelming support. And we've been working until then to continue to raise funding. And you'll see, we've just been working for the last year and a half to raise funding, and we've made great progress. And here we are, close to having full funding, but not quite there. We still have a gap. We have until actually May 7th, but even earlier, let's say the end of April, to demonstrate to Marin County that we've raised full funding to purchase the property through gifts in hand, through pledges, through agendized items with state conservation agencies. And the reason we have to do that by May 7th is because the county on May 7th at their Board of Supervisors meeting would like to authorize the sale of these bonds. The bond, this relates to the Measure M bond, the Measure M ballot Measure M that was on the November ballot. Those bonds need to be sold in order to generate the proceeds that will be used to acquire Martha. And you can't put the bond genie back in the bottle. So if we haven't demonstrated that we have the full funding to move forward with the acquisition, the county would not be in a position to sell those bonds and bring in a significant portion of that funding. Under the option agreement that we've negotiated with the Martha Company, we have until June 14th to exercise the option. We have a 60 to 90-day closing period. So we have time between exercise and close of escrow to pull the funding into escrow and consummate the transaction. So I just wanted to give you that's a little bit of the transactional background, some key dates. On the next slide I've just highlighted for your benefit, just really the key dates from our perspective, which is this May 7th Board of Supervisors date, County Board of Supervisors date, by which we have to show that we have full funding to move forward. As you know, it takes a while to, county staff will have to prepare their memorandum in advance of May 7th. So we have an earlier date by which we'd like to meet with the county to demonstrate that. And then the last day to exercise the option. So we're really close, and we've got about a month to pull everything together. I think this is the most critical slide for today's purpose. This is the current status of our funding efforts. Our funding efforts are ongoing, but we really wanted to present to you the numbers that we have secured or have a high degree of confidence in. We are continuing to do work. This is a fairly complex process in that we're talking to a number of different funders simultaneously. But let me just walk you through where we are. So you'll see the top category is the current projection, the current bond yield projection. This is based on a Marin County analysis performed by their banker and bond attorney and staff. And so we're very fortunate in that we're actually anticipate getting more out of the bonds than we had originally anticipated when we went to the ballots, when we put the measure on the ballot in November of 2022. The Jerry and the Tiburon Open Space Group had the foresight in the 90s to identify Martha as a potential property for acquisition. Wasn't on the market then, it wasn't available then, it is now. There's some bond proceeds remaining from the 1990s Mello-Roos bond measures that were put on the ballot. And with some interest earned, that's at just over 2.3, just under 2.4 million available. Marin County, at the time we got under agreement with them, pledged $6 million in Measure A funds. The town of Tiburon, as you, I believe, know, has pledged $1 million through private philanthropy individuals and local foundations, including the Belvedere Foundation, Peninsula Foundation. We've worked to secure pledges and gifts of just under $3 million. We also have a $1.5 million grant award from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation. And we are in the process of really confirming our state agency awards. So we do have, what I've put in here is a number that we're confident that we will get. We're working with our state agency partners to maximize state funding. But I just wanted to give you a solid number that we feel confident in. That's a process where we have to work with the agencies to not just submit applications for money, but then work through grant agreements and various other agreements. And that doesn't just involve us, but it involves Marin County as well as the ultimate owner and steward of the property. So there's some complexity to that process. But again, these are the numbers that we are feeling very confident in that bring us up to a little over $40 million. We are working with potential donors now. We're working with our state agency partners, and we do anticipate being able to, we will update the council on April 8th. But today we're just really wanting to give you this information, and to the extent you're, and ask you to consider, a modest contribution. As you can see, what I love about this chart is the number of, it does really take a village to do incredible work. And we have so many partners, incredible partners and funding partners on this project at the local, regional, state level. So I wanted to, one thing I wanted to mention about the Belvedere Foundation, the gift that they have given is $50,000, and then but they've also offered a match. There's a request for matching $50,000 to the acquisition. So that's sort of the current status of that local foundation funding. And I just wanted to invite Jerry back up to say some closing remarks, and then of course we're available for questions.
Again, I just want to reiterate what I started with, that in our mind, this is an informational meeting, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have. We don't see this as an ask situation. It will be entirely up to you all to sort out what you think is appropriate, or if you want to participate in preserving the property. That's it.
Yeah, well, I'm sure we've got some questions. Let me jump in with a few just to start with, Erica. The last slide you presented, which was very helpful, showing where the funding has come from. A couple of questions about that. The 5.5 million coming from state agencies. Do I read this correctly that there may be an additional 1.5 million on top of that 5.5, but you won't know until May? as to whether you get it?
Yeah, we probably will have some sense actually in April because we anticipate that the county agency, I'm sorry, the state agency will publish an agenda for a May 23rd board meeting.
But the 1.5 is in addition then to the 5.5 you listed.
Yeah, I would say conservatively, there's a $1.5 million request that has been approved, but we're working through some issues with the documentation. And then there is an additional $5 million request. And we're, we do feel as though that's the one that we'll hear about in April.
So,
And-
which are either of those are included in the 5.5 million number?
So we've actually included the 5 million. We have a high degree of confidence in the 5 million outstanding request.
Okay.
But I just can't, as I stand here today, I don't have confirmation from the agencies.
Mhm.
But we have a long-standing relationship with this
But
particular agency.
And
So we're in
in
conversation.
addition to the 5.5, there's an additional pending 1.5.
There is, yeah.
And that one is also the one that you won't know for sure until April.
Well, we're working now to finalize some documentation in that award. So yeah, in April is again when
Okay, I wasn't sure. I mean, you had the sentence TPL anticipates an additional award in
Yeah,
May.
yeah.
And I'm not sure, it looked like that was referring to the previous sentence that had the 1.5 million.
Yeah, no, that's additional above and beyond the 1.5 million.
Ah, okay.
yeah.
That's the 5
Yeah,
million.
sorry, that was a
it.
early morning
Okay.
revision that isn't very
Okay.
clear.
A couple other quick questions about that chart is my sources, I don't know how good they are, but tell me that in addition to the 1 million Tiburon has pledged that they are considering or have indicated they will give an additional million on top of that.
Well, I think we anticipate going to, and I'll invite Jerry to add anything, but we do anticipate going to Tiburon on April 3rd to give them an update. One thing that I think is important is that on April 3rd and on April 8th, we'd be asking for a pledge. So I think, as I said, there's a certain amount of complexity as we're waiting for all of these things to really come into focus or to be confirmed. And that also includes the private philanthropy that we're doing. We're talking with individual donors. So we're really working to get that clarity and we'll continue to do so even up until the exercise date. But in the meantime, we'd be asking for a pledge, maybe even up to amount. And then we would come back to kind of go through and provide an accounting really of where we are. So yes.
So with respect to Tiburon.
With Tiburon on April 3rd, we don't know what we're going to ask. As you get a sense of it, this is
In addition to the 1 million shown here.
the million is in and done, and that's done, gone.
Okay.
200,000 of it's already been spent on the option agreement. But we are on the calendar for April 3rd with the Tiburon Council to give them an update and potentially ask for an up to amount. And we don't know what that amount is at the moment, whereas you can see there's still some things that are in the works.
Got it. Then the last question is with respect to the 50,000 pledge from the Belvedere Community Foundation, is that included in your numbers here?
That is included in the private philanthropy
Okay.
number. And thank you for correcting me on the Belvedere Community Foundation. I just had a mental lapse.
Yeah. Just for the benefit of the committee here, and Sandy and I are both on the Belvedere Community Foundation board, is the initial request that was submitted to the Belvedere Community Foundation was for 25,000. At the foundation board last Thursday unanimously doubled that to 50,000 simply because they thought this was an effort that we couldn't afford to let pass.
Thank you.
Okay. it is, it says anyone, we will match any $50,000 more that comes in after last Thursday, which if they don't get another 50,000 from someplace, they aren't going to be acquiring land. So no, we will match the next 50 that are given, period, the end. But there will be another 50 or we wouldn't even be acquiring the land. So for all practical purposes, it's a grant of 50,000.
The ceiling is 50,000.
Yes.
I have a couple of-
Did I describe that correctly, Sandy? Okay.
You want to go? Sally?
Yeah. Oh, right. There was a guaranteed 25 and the next 25 gets you up to the 50. Okay. Yep. Yep. John, go ahead.
No, I think Sally.
Sally.
I have just a couple of quick questions. On the first two items on the list, obviously a condition on debt financing costs. And so my question is, if interest rates go up
Yeah.
between now and when the debt is issued, who covers that gap?
Yeah.
So, very good question. And obviously we asked the county because I don't know about you, but maybe 3 times a day I check to see what the 10-year bonds are selling for. And I'm getting a little tired of that process. So fortunately, the county has very graciously provided certainty so that if in fact interest rates go up between now and actual funding is, as you can see, August, September is when it's going to actually happen. If interest rates go up between now and then, the county will contribute funds for the shortfall that happens. So it can't get worse. And so then the obvious follow-on question is, what if things get better? What if interest rates go down, which is the world's thought, but you never know. What they said is the increased value that will result from that will be applied to the bonds and they will be shortened. So instead of a 30-year bond, it will become a 29.5-year bond or whatever the math dictates. So we are all totally protected from interest rates.
But the number of years on the parcel tax will be unchanged. That will still be, is it 30 years, I assume?
He's having trouble hearing.
I'm sorry. The duration of the parcel tax itself is fixed at 30 years. Is that right? Regardless of whether the bond gets shortened? The new bond, yeah. The new parcel tax is a 30-year tax. And so that wouldn't be shortened if you manage to reduce debt financing costs. No. No, because you're saying you might shorten the duration of the maturity of the bond if interest rates fall, but that won't affect the amount of years that you will collect the parcel tax. Okay. And then the other question I had is, Erica, when we'd met before, I think private can never say the word philanthropy was at about 3.3 million, and it's now dropped. Can you explain that gap?
It may be that, and let me think, just one add-on to what Jerry said just before I lose this thread is that the purchase and sale agreement that we've negotiated with the county will be updated to include their total contribution, and that will be fixed. So they will have agreed to put in this $20.8 million, regardless of where that actually falls out once the bonds go to market. So the 3.3, I'm just trying to think back to the chart the chart is that we talked through. I think that's because we are in conversation with a major donor. And so, what we wanted to put here was pledges that have been signed, donations that have been made. What we're bringing to you is these are 100% confirmed. And so I think that explains the difference, is the extent to which we're currently in conversation with the donor.
Yeah, I had the same question on the bond, but you've answered that, so thanks. I'm assuming that when you did the financing before the bond amount was determined, you had a similar type of table. And you said, 42.1 is the purchase price. And I've got donations from X, Y, and Z, and therefore the bond has to be this amount. So it's an indirect way of asking the same question as Sally. When you look at it, if the bond was fixed at 20.8 and you knew you were going to buy it for 42.1, you had to finance the difference between those two numbers. So if you looked at this table, where is the shortfall come from? Because I presume you could have increased the bond. That's an assumption. Could you have increased the bond to 22?
Well, it's interesting. At the time that we actually came up with the parcel tax amount.
Yep.
We were reflecting on some Jerry's previous experience in the 90s and on some,
Can I answer that?
yeah, go ahead and start and I can jump
Yeah.
on.
So so we came up with a purchase price of 42.1. And so you start trying to figure out a budget of how you're going to get
Right.
there.
Yeah.
And my opinion was that we had to have a bond that would, the new bond would have to be arguably similar to what people had been paying. And so I felt, and this is where we ended up, is that people had been paying for 30 years, $98 for each parcel. So $196 a year, 196. So I also felt, and we all felt that any increase over more than $100 would be challenging. So where we sort of landed is we can do something in the range of $300 a year, arguing that it is only $100 more than you have been spending, because both of those existing bonds, one is already expired. It was in 1993, so in 2023 it expired. Actually, it's expiring in July of this year. And the other will expire a few years later. So the logic was we wanted something that was $100 more than people had been spending. So that set the bond number, period. A lot of people have said to me, maybe where you're headed is, well, Jesus, you got 80% success rate in the bond issue. Why didn't you just max that out? And I believe, and I walked the streets and I talked to a zillion people, I believe that if we had tried that approach, it would have failed, that we would have reached a tipping point, but it.
Okay.
And just to add to that, we actually did, we had anecdotally this sort of sense of what the taxpayer could really absorb. We also did do professional polling to talk to people within the community. And that was really borne out. I mean, I think that we tested that theory. So it wasn't just, we weren't just sort of out, riffing on this concept. We really did test that. And that was true. That was really the sweet spot. So that's how we got there. When we first put that on the ballot, the estimate at that time was actually that we'd have about $18 million in proceeds. So that number has changed over time as the economic circumstances have changed. It's actually a fairly complex analysis that isn't just looking at the change in interest rates. It's a little more complex than we might think as we're out reading the news.
I just want to follow on from John's question though, because I think the question was, how did you initially plan to fill the gap? Because it's a very large gap.
Yeah, we've always planned. We knew going into this project, and I've been working on this project for over 10 years. Jerry's been working on it for over 30. So we've always known that it was be a mixed, many different sources of funding. Largely a large philanthropic component. This is, very important local asset in a community that is has resources. We suspected that there would be some Marin County funding as well, local, Tiburon, potentially Belvedere funding, and state agency funding. To be honest with you, we never anticipated getting as much state agency funding as we expect to get. Just knowing state priorities across the, their conservation priorities and funding priorities across the state. And there are a lot of wonderful competitive projects. So we had identified the various sources of funding, and then we've had to go out and talk to all of those different funders and put together applications and requests. And philanthropic, we knew would be a significant component, and we're still working. We're still talking to individual donors. And so, we've had to kind of cobble together this plan, and it's been it's evolves. It's an evolving thing. This is a complicated process of talking over the last 2 years to many different funders. So we wasn't so simple as saying we'll get $10 million here and $5 million there and $1 million there. We didn't know what the local
No, I was
philanthropic
just
community would
asking,
do.
if you look down this thing, what's the surprises? What's the negative surprises?
Yeah.
And what's the positive ones? That was what I was
Oh,
trying to
yeah,
get at. So
yeah.
You knew you had 20 point whatever and you had
Yeah.
42. You must have penciled in stuff from different
Yeah.
people. So, I mean, you don't have to go in depth, but
Yeah,
what's the upside and downside on these funders?
Yeah. Well, as I said, the bond funding was really a threshold
Okay.
issue for us. If that bond measure didn't pass, we wouldn't be able to go forward with the project.
Yep.
And we've been pleasantly surprised, by the overwhelming support for that bond measure,
Okay.
by the current projection, and the fact that the county has basically guaranteed it. We've been surprised. We were thrilled that the county additionally put in $6 million in Measure A funding, which is the sales tax, the countywide sales tax. We had anticipated about $5 million in philanthropic funding, and we feel like we're, meeting that goal. So we've really, of course, we'll exceed that goal if we can, but I think we've been really thrilled by the support we've had across the board. But it takes a lot of effort and a lot of conversation and a lot of hard work.
If you exceed the goal of 42.1, what happens to the additional funds?
Well, again, we wouldn't, so we're fundraising for capital. We're fundraising for the 42.1. So, we're coming to you, for example, potentially to Tiburon for a pledge of up to. And so we wouldn't, if we don't need the funding for capital, we won't
Okay.
bring in the full pledge amounts. So, there's going to be a process as we exercise and start to pull everything together. That's not true of the state agency funding, however. We don't go back and forth with the state on, if they make an award, that goes to capital.
I would assume that the Belvedere City Council will ask the question, well, if ours is an up to amount, are we the first one who gets something less, or is there already a list of people who have pledged up to?
Yeah.
Well, let me
Yeah.
try this. I mean, so the state agencies are in for an amount and that's it. The county's in, the bond issue's in. So really what you're, I believe, talking about is between Tiburon and Belvedere. And if you want to make your pledge as an up to amount, then we'd have to coordinate that with Tiburon. Obviously, I'd just as soon not get into a three-party negotiation between.
So none of these numbers on the list are based on an up to amount. This is just kind of for Belvedere and Tiburon, you're suggesting that.
I mean, at any rate, we're open to whatever works for you guys.
Yep.
Is the simple answer.
And just on the bond, the parcel tax is payable by all the residents of Belvedere and only the residents of Tiburon that are this side of Trestle Glen, correct? So would it be fair to say that the Belvedere community relative to the whole of Tiburon is paying more proportionately? Because part of Tiburon is not included in the parcel tax. Would that be a correct statement, or?
I've never followed this logic, but I'm happy to give it a go again to explain it. I'm sorry, I'm having.
No, it's fine, Jerry. I'm just saying, like Tiburon is X, and the parcel tax for Tiburon is only the residents this side of Trestle Glen.
Correct.
So as a proportion, all the residents of Belvedere are servicing the bond, and only a proportion of Tiburon residents are servicing the bond. So would it be correct to say that when you look at Tiburon and Belvedere, Belvedere is paying a higher proportion if you looked at Belvedere and Tiburon as wholes?
But paying more through the bond issue.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Just the bond issue, not these other things.
No,
It
no,
comes
the
down
bond.
to-
Yeah.
Belvedere pays $300 per capita and Tiburon pays $222 per capita, $150 per capita. Per capita, Belvedere residents, Belvedere as a city, per capita pays $300 per resident. Tiburon pays $150 per resident. I think that's your argument.
I wasn't arguing. I was just
Or your
asking for, yeah, I was just,
It's $335 for every one of you, and it's $335 for me, and it's $335.
But only for half of Tiburon.
so the people in Tiburon that live the other side of Trestle,
They pay zero.
yes, that's what I'm getting at, yeah.
And the logic there, which we
That's
came to 30 years ago when we did Old St. Hilary's.
Yes.
We said, where should we draw the line? We're going to do a Mello-Roos district where we're going to have a taxing entity. You just draw your line wherever you draw it. And inside pays, outside does not. And so the logic was anybody that lived on the other side of Trestle Glen, they want to go in the open space, they're going to go to Green Mountain.
Got it.
They're not going to ride all the way down
Yeah.
here. Martha. and
Oh.
So it is just that Mello-Roos district, and it's obviously county folks on Paradise Drive. The 300 people that live over there, they pay $335 per parcel.
Got it.
And I'm not sure, I don't know the numbers. It is a good question also, just to, as we think, prior to April 8th. I'm not sure it's property owners. I'm just not sure of how the actual population, what the number is if you don't include the people beyond Trestle Glen, if it's half or some percentage. It still is a large number of property owners in Tiburon who obviously are paying the full tax. But there was a reason for drawing the boundary in that way. It was that, it would, yeah.
And I'll just add to that by saying, when we did it, we thought, well, I hope that's good logic. And I'll tell you that when the results came in 1993 and 1997 and in 2020, as you got closer and closer to that line, started to fade. And so, one question that we're often asked is, well, why didn't you just do all of Tiburon? Because what would have happened is you would have had a bunch of no votes.
Yeah.
And it likely
No, it
wouldn't
probably
get
made
reversed.
sense. Yeah, I just think it does, by necessity, it implies that as a proportion, the residents of Belvedere are paying more in terms of servicing the bond relative to the total population of Tiburon. That's all. So, we are making a fairly sizable contribution if you look at it that way. I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing. It's just a fact. Yeah. It'd be a good thing. Yeah.
Okay, other questions from? Oh,
Yep.
David, go for it.
Okay, first I want to thank Erica and especially Jerry for coming and making this presentation. I remember taking a piece of cardboard and sliding down on those dry grasses 65 years ago. So this is kind of a one-shot deal on it. I have a question about fire protection. Who has the responsibility for the fire protection on this subject land at this time? Does anyone know?
Well, it's private. Oh,
Is this on? Yeah, on. Fire protection is by district. I mean, it's going to be the same fire protection that's just 1 foot outside the property. It's fine.
I
So
mean, the question is all the Martha property included in the Tiburon Fire District? I think it is, but I don't know that for certain.
is all, say that again, Bob?
Is all of the Martha property included within the boundaries of the Tiburon Fire District?
I would say yes, but I'm happy to ask them. It's in Old St. Hilary's for 30 years, they've been providing that service.
Okay, so that we're assuming that all or the majority of the property is currently under the Tiburon Fire District and would continue to be under that district if this transfer goes through.
Yeah.
we
Okay,
believe so, but we can certainly confirm that.
well, okay. So have you asked the Tiburon Fire District for any contribution?
Wow, this gets better and better.
Well, I'm just,
I think it's a very
they
good
have a
question.
pretty strong revenue stream and a, pretty solid balance sheet. And there's nothing intended other than just curiosity on that question.
We haven't asked them.
I guess, David, there might be a question as to whether or not they could even do that or not. I have no idea what restrictions are on their funds
That's an
and
interesting question. We haven't thought of it. It's not, it's a question we could ask. I've never for the acquisitions that, I've worked on the Bay Area, we don't typically, it's not a common source of funding, but, I think.
we
these
have a
are-
unique fire district that has more money than they seem to know what to do with.
And we're always open to ideas for where to go for
That's
funding.
sort of
so
the
I
basis of
appreciate
the
idea,
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I had some of the other questions that have already been discussed. So I think I'm good for now. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
other questions from,
I'm just looking at their map. It does seem to cover the entire peninsula in this region, including Belvedere.
okay. Other questions from any members of the committee? Hearing none. Jerry and Erica, thank you very much. As I indicated to you, we're now going to ask Helga to give us some input upon the up to the minute finances of our city. And obviously you're welcome to stay for that.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Chair McCaskill. We would like to provide you with a preliminary summary of the operating and capital budget for fiscal year 24-25. This information may be helpful to you in deciding on the funding request for Martha's property. The draft budget is scheduled to be reviewed by the Finance Committee on April 30th. So this is just a draft preliminary summary of the budget. So here is an initial draft version of the 24-25 budget 5-year forecast for the general fund reserve. As per the forecast, we have a surplus of 168,000 in 24-25. However, this is because we retained some of the excess reserves available at the end of fiscal year 22-23 in the general fund. It is predicted that in the upcoming years, we will be close to the 50% mark if revenues are received and funds expended as it's currently projected. This draft budget does take into account the capital projects that require planning over the next couple of years. These projects include a 2.2 million for the seawall repair projects on Beach Road over a 3-year period, starting in fiscal year 24-25, along with 172,000 for the retaining wall repair projects, also in 24-25. It is anticipated that these large projects will require funding from the critical infrastructure reserve in the outer years of the forecast period. And finally, I wanted to review the anticipated transfers. As per the current policies, we are obligated to allocate funds for various purposes. These include the 115 Pension Trust Fund, the Fire Fund transfer, and the pension-related debt obligation transfers. Additionally, we have currently allocated 200,000 for insurance and legal reserve to cover ongoing litigation outside the city's insured risk, 108,000 for new replacement vehicle for Public Works and the replacement of aged audio equipment here in the council chambers. And we've allocated 170,000 for road impact fee fund to cover road maintenance projects. And there's 826,000 for the capital projects, which include the beginning phase of the seawall repair and retaining wall projects, as well as 305,000 into the critical infrastructure fund in anticipation of the larger portions of the seawall repair project in the coming years. So, and with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Just real quickly, Helga, you started out by talking about the 2.2 million beach road repairs. And I kind of lost, I see the things you have in front of us now are included in the budget going out several years. I wasn't so clear about the 2.2 million.
So it's included in under the capital projects section of the budget. I'm not showing that section here, but it does affect the transfers
Okay, but
from the general
but
fund.
it's fully accounted for
It is, yes.
in the projected budget. Thank you.
Correct.
Can I follow up on that real quick? Can you go back to the next slide or forward to the next slide? You've got 826 in the first portion, or some portion of that is part one of the Beach Road improvements.
That's correct.
Are there annual projections out of a base transfer, or do they all come out of the critical infrastructure funds going forward?
The outer years come out, a portion of it comes out of the critical infrastructure fund.
So there are forgive my generality, but there are line item capital improvement funds as well as transfers from the critical infrastructure fund to fill out that 2.2 in outer years beyond whatever portion of the 826 that is.
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Helga, how much are you planning to have left in the critical infrastructure fund by the end of the project?
Um,
I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
I would have 59,000.
Okay, so really low. And then the second question I have, because you just gave me some extra information on the fire district, which is depressing. But on your transfers here, you've got the fire fund, including the full deferral payment of 177,000 that we owe, but that is now not correct. Is that the case?
So no, what I did was I put into the budget the 2.3 million that they're estimating for the contract payment for fiscal year 24-25,
Right.
plus the 185,000, which would be the city's share of the 885,000 that's the current deferral from the fire district.
So
So I have about little over 2.4 million in the budget.
136 plus the receipts from the fire tax.
Correct.
So you've only got a delta there of like 60 or so thousand, is that correct? Versus this new information that we've learned? Because you'd assumed in the 2.3 million that a part of the deferral was included in that 2.3 and it no longer is
No, I added it in originally,
on top of the 2.3.
Yes.
So you added 2.3 plus 185.
85.
Okay, so that 185, we don't have an obligation to pay in the coming year. We only have an obligation to pay a part of it, or,
Correct. They will have a part.
okay. And so we can push that out a few years if we wanted to, but one way or another, we need to eat it. And on that 5-year forecast, whether we eat it today or in years 2, 3, 4, or 5, the reserve goal is the reserve outcome is still the same. It's not going to change anything there.
In theory, yes.
Okay. And given that they're saying now that even with smoothing, it looks like 7.5% a year, is that built into the outer year forecast or not?
I believe I had 6% in the assumptions for the
So-
fire.
So we're going to have to
Contract.
upgrade that to 7.5.
would.
So it's going to make the reserve position look worse than currently shown in these forecasts.
Yes.
Okay. Because I think that's the thing to stress here, that this is really early data on the budget, and we don't usually present the budget at this point in time because there's a lot of moving parts, correct?
There are.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the fire district, in speaking with them, they're in negotiations. So, their budget is not really firmed up at this time either. So she's not anticipating that they'll have firm numbers till about the middle of May.
But she's estimating it's going to go up 7.5%.
Yes.
And what's the difference, dollar amount between the 7.5 and the 6%? How big a number is that?
Um, Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
about
that's
100,
100K per year.
Right.
And that seems to be because of this, the upgrade to the fire station, and they haven't, by the looks of it, quite figured out how they're going to finance it, correct? Is that what
That's
this?
correct. And that was not added in as part of the 885. The 885 in the current deferrals is just what was left over from last fiscal year that was rolled forward.
And that deferral, the 185 is the extreme, the cap of our portion of the deferral?
Yeah.
I thought it was more than that always. It's,
Well, when we did the budget last year, they were estimating our deferral, total deferrals were 1.365 million. And so when I contacted her for this budget cycle, she said that the deferrals were a little less. They came in less and were 885,000.
And over what period of time does that 885 have to be paid?
They try to smooth it out to keep our
Oh, yeah,
increase as much kind of even, so.
I want to go back to the previous slide.
Mhm.
And I think, so 23, 24, no, not that one. Yeah. So 23, 24 budget ends this July.
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
And what would be, if you did this table, what would be the over under that you're estimating for the year we're in?
we left 200, but the expectation was to be 200, right?
So we do have an excess for this fiscal year.
I mean, it's an estimate, Helga, right? Because you haven't closed the books.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not holding
So
you to, I'm just
yeah.
ballpark,
It's more around 500 or more.
about 500K this year.
It could be, yes.
Could be. And then when you're looking at 24, 25, what? Okay, so we're rolling that, I mean, let's assume it's 500K, that goes into our unallocated reserve, and then we're drawing on that by running a deficit next year, yeah. Okay.
Other questions of Helga?
It does go back to David's question. The fire department seems to be. Someone should ask the fire
It's
department.
like a sailboat. It's a big black hole. Okay, if there are no further questions of Helga, before we open it for discussion, Helga, should we ask for open forum for any members of the public that may be here or online?
We can do that.
Okay, if there are any members of the public here that would like to speak, and I see one stepping forward, we'll recognize Sandy. Yes, yes, right.
Right.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Did you hear what I said? So anyway, I would just encourage you all to recommend to the council that we do something. Because I think the community would be very proud. I mean, there it is. You can see it. Something that's going to live on for so many generations. So I would hope that the council will, and the committee will recommend some sort of support for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public on the Zoom call that would like to have any comments at this point in time?
I see no hands raised.
Okay, we'll close the public session and bring it back to the committee for a discussion. Who would like to start?
Can I ask one quick question? Helga, there's nothing in these numbers, your numbers, already expecting some sort of contribution.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I'll kick it off. I think, as Sally's indicated and Helga, I mean, the budget's pretty tight going forward, and we have this deferral of hanging over our head on fire issue that we can kick down the road a little bit. So I sort of see it as a trade-off between our bottom line and deferring the fire department's liability, you know, the amount we owe them over time. I do believe that it would be useful, given the numbers, it would be a desirable thing for us to make a contribution. Exactly what that is, and I think you implied it a little bit, is it conditional upon others filling the gap first? Because going back to my earlier point, I think Belvedere is the citizens of Belvedere are contributing quite a bit through the parcel tax. So I don't think we should lose sight of that. But on top of that, this is so close that, you know, I would like us to make some contribution towards closing the gap and configuring it in a way that is consistent with our budget at the same time as almost a sort of last in contribution, but I think we should make one. I'm not sure we should discuss exactly now what that would be, but that would be where I'm coming at.
Can I just jump in there? Because I think what the city council will be helpful for the city council who will make the decision is really affordability. Like what's a range of affordability would I think be helpful. I mean, do you agree with that? Would be helpful more than the decision.
Whether we have to do that now.
Coming to council in April.
Right, yeah, any recommendation we make has to be made today because the council will have to decide at their April meeting.
Okay.
So if we applied the typical Tiburon Belvedere mix, but also take into account what you're saying that, you know, for the bond itself, the Belvedere citizens are paying a larger proportion. Maybe there's some amount that we can commit and another amount that would be an up to that, takes into account that logic, because if Tiburon has already pledged $1 million and we haven't pledged anything, if I used half of the normal 20/80 ratio, because our citizens are paying more down the road, then maybe instead of 250, which would be the 20/80, it's 125 as a pledge. And if Tiburon ups their commitment down the road, then we could up it as well to no more than 250.
The one thing that worries me about the up to thing is that if I were on the council, I would not want to do an up to amount, knowing that Tiburon has done that as well. And then we have to go duke it out with Tiburon, which is never a pretty experience. The fact they've already given $1 million, and I suspect they're going to give a lot more. I think that if it came down to us deciding, all right, which one of you are going to go higher, they would probably argue it should be us. If I were on the council, I'd want to come up with a hard dollar figure and not do an up to. I think realistically, the mood of both Tiburon and Belvedere is that one way or the other, this project has to go. And if 10 days before the deadline, they don't have the money, I think somebody's going to have to raise some money. But I would be, Belvedere, given the tenuous nature of our finances, I'd be a little nervous about doing the up to amount. But that's ultimately going to be up to the council, I suppose. If Sally, your suggestion that what we should tell the council is how much can they afford to, that may be the up to amount, and then the council has to decide what the actual amount is. I don't know.
I mean, again, these are really initial budget numbers, so it's just really unfortunate that we're in this position to have to make any decisions right now, because it's unusual in terms of the cycle. But from what I've understood so far, we're going to have to give something up to give anything. And so then the question is, what are we willing to give up from our city's budget that we would otherwise be financing to give money? And I'm not saying that isn't the right decision, because I think Jerry's correctly pointed out that the community, strongly supported this measure. And these numbers just pale in comparison to the amount that the taxpayers will be paying over the 30 years, which is in, roughly 10 million from Belvedere and 20 million from Tiburon. So these are very small numbers, but it's just that question of, what do you guys think within the budget we can give up?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was thinking of as we said, that we're really tight on the budget, and the only wiggle room we've got a little bit is on this deferral to the fire department, and it sort of puts you in a 50 to 100K range in my mind, because I haven't got all the numbers here. So I think we're in that range. I quite like your idea, but I agree with Oliver about up to. So if they wanted a number, we would simply say to the council that, the trade-off you're making is clearing up our deferral to the fire department relative to making a contribution to this thing, which everyone seems to believe is a well-deserving high priority project. And then maybe we put a cap on it.
Yeah.
I would think about up to 100K, but I'm really throwing a number out there. I don't have a great basis for it. I'm doing it relative to the payment to the deferral. So let me put it, Helga, how much of the deferral are we paying again in your budget?
185,850.
Sort of halving the declining. See, that's the way I'm thinking about it. That's the only sort of wiggle room I've got. I can push that out a little bit further.
I mean, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that this committee has talked about why in the heck don't we owe the 185 today for financial purposes? And most of us think we do, but the accountants let us put it off. But it's not like it's not going to be owed. They say today you owe us 885. So we're basically borrowing from Peter to pay Paul.
Correct. But that's where we are.
Yep.
Yeah.
David,
So I have a question on that deferral as well, Helga. Do we pay interest on the deferred amount?
No.
I don't believe so.
I think the answer is no, David.
Yeah. That's my only question at this time.
Bob?
Other thoughts from the committee?
Have one number for the ask the city council for. I think 125 should be the number because that would be half of the actual Tiburon Belvedere split. I don't want to be pointed to that as that part. And it's the role next reserve and all this year, not reserve. Bonus, so that
Okay, so we have one suggestion, 50 to 100. We have a second suggestion of 125. Other committee members?
Just as a data point, 125 was what we gave to the library.
Uh,
Just a data point. Is that correct, or did I get that wrong?
150,000.
Forget that.
Peter, Sally, you want to? David,
Yeah, I would support the 125.
Well, Bob, what you could do is say that the finance committee said up to 125 and allow the council to make the final decision. But no more than that, because otherwise.
yeah,
we
I
really
mean,
are-
that would fall into Sally's, what could we afford if we
Correct.
had to?
I mean, we'd have to tell the council that you're leaving 60 left for the deferral of the fire department rather than 185. But that's, yeah. And that council decide. We could say this committee's ceiling because is 125 and the council can make a final decision.
Okay,
What do you think, Sally?
Sally, Peter?
We're giving something up, but if the fire district's willing to hold at least part of that deferral out a few more years, it's not true wiggle room because we're going to have to find the money in the outer years instead of this year. But I mean, I
Correct.
think that seems reasonable, and I like Patrick's suggestion that it's the normal match, at least for the initial 1 million that Tiburon has committed to.
So then we would need a recommendation from the committee
Yep.
for the up to.
Peter, do you have any thoughts? Well, it sounds like the preferred alternative is to say that the committee has considered the request and our recommendation to the city council is that we believe, based on the current state of finances, that the city could afford as much as 125,000 as a pledge toward the campaign. Does that sound like a reasonable recommendation?
Yes.
Did you get enough of that down, Helga?
Yes.
Okay, is there a motion for that? I'll make the motion.
Yep.
Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Oh, I need to do a roll call.
Yes.
Chair McCaskill,
Yes.
David Walker,
Aye.
John Wilton,
Yes.
Patrick Fader,
yes.
Will Lyon.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Jerry and Erica, thank you very much. That this, if ever there was a wonderful project for our combined cities, this is it, and you guys are our heroes. Thank you. And at that point, there's no further items on the agenda. We're adjourned.
Good.
Thank you.
Well done, Bob. No, I mean, we've got the good spot, I think.
Yeah.